The Sioux Nation, one of the largest and most influential Native American groups, occupied vast regions of the Great Plains, stretching from the present-day state of Minnesota to the eastern Rocky Mountains. The Sioux were not a monolithic tribe, but a confederation of three distinct divisions, the Lakota, Nakota, and Dakota, each of which spoke a slightly different dialect of the same language, Shushan. These three divisions, while distinct, shared common cultural values, social structures, and a deep spiritual connection to the natural world. The Sioux lived in a world where the buffalo was central to almost every aspect of life. This massive animal was not only a crucial food source, but also provided the materials for clothing, tools, weapons, and shelter. The Sioux's ability to live symbiotically with the buffalo was extraordinary. They hunted these animals using sophisticated techniques, often driving entire herds off cliffs or using carefully planned ambushes. The buffalo was considered sacred, and hunting it required a deep respect for the animal's spirit. This relationship between the Sioux and the buffalo was a central tenet of their worldview, where nature and the spirit world were intricately woven together. The Sioux were also expert horsemen, a skill they developed after acquiring horses from the Spanish in the 17th century. By the 18th century, they had fully embraced horseback riding, using it to hunt more efficiently and wage war with exceptional speed and precision. The Sioux's cavalry was legendary, often overwhelming enemies with lightning-fast attacks, making them one of the most formidable groups in North America. The horse allowed the Sioux to become mobile and fluid in battle, giving them an advantage that other tribes and even European settlers struggled to counter. In addition to their physical prowess, the Sioux also possessed a rich spiritual and cultural heritage. Their belief system was based on the idea of Wakantanka, or the Great Spirit, which governed the universe. They believed that everything in nature, the sky, the earth, the animals, the plants, was imbued with spiritual significance. Their ceremonies, such as the sun dance, were designed to honor these spirits and maintain harmony with the forces that governed the natural world. These ceremonies were often grueling and physically demanding, requiring participants to endure pain and sacrifice to demonstrate their devotion. The Sioux's peaceful existence was shattered as European settlers began to move westward. In 1851, the U.S. government signed the Treaty of Fort Laramie with the Sioux, promising to guarantee their hunting grounds and protect their sovereignty in exchange for allowing settlers to pass through their lands. However, this treaty, like many others signed during this period, was soon broken as the U.S. government sought to expand its territory, especially after the discovery of gold in the Black Hills in 1874, which was considered sacred land by the Sioux. The Sioux, led by great leaders such as Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, resisted the incursion of settlers and the U.S. military into their lands. Tensions boiled over into violent conflict, culminating in one of the most famous battles in American history, the Battle of Little Big Horn in 1876. In this battle, a combined force of Sioux and Cheyenne warriors decisively defeated General George Custer and his 7th Cavalry. The victory was a powerful statement of Native American resilience and military prowess, but it also marked the beginning of the end for the Sioux's resistance. The U.S. government, enraged by the loss, escalated its efforts to suppress the Sioux, and over the next several years, the tribe was forced onto reservations. In 1890, in what would come to be known as the Wounded Knee Massacre, U.S. Army troops killed more than 200 Sioux men, women, and children at Wounded Knee Creek, effectively ending the Sioux resistance. This brutal event symbolized the tragic conclusion of the Sioux's struggle to maintain their traditional way of life. To the south, the Comanche were making their own mark on history. Originally part of the Shoshone tribe, the Comanche were not sedentary, but nomadic, moving with the seasons across vast territories in the southern Great Plains, from Texas to New Mexico and beyond. The introduction of horses by the Spanish in the 16th century revolutionized the Comanche way of life. By the 18th century, the Comanche had become one of the most fearsome cavalry-based tribes in the Americas. The Comanche were known for their exceptional horsemanship and their fierce warrior culture. They were expert riders, able to maneuver at great speed and skill, making them deadly in combat. Their raids were legendary, and their strategy focused on quick, unpredictable strikes. Rather than engaging in large-scale battles, the Comanche preferred smaller, faster raids, hitting their enemies with overwhelming force before retreating into the vast plains. They would strike quickly and then disappear, often before the enemy could mount a defense. The Comanche were known for their exceptional horsemanship and their fierce warrior culture. They were expert riders, able to maneuver at great speed and skill, making them deadly in combat. Their raids were legendary, and their strategy focused on quick, unpredictable strikes. Force before retreating into the vast plains. They would strike quickly and then disappear, often before the enemy could mount a defense. Rather than engaging in large-scale battles, the Comanche preferred smaller, faster raids, hitting their enemies with overwhelming. Their military tactics were unmatched. The Comanche would use decoys, feints, and ambush to confuse their enemies, often drawing them into traps. Their ability to fight effectively on horseback was not just about speed, but also about precision. Comanche warriors were armed with bows and lances, which they used with deadly accuracy while riding at full gallop. Their raids were so successful that they terrorized both rival tribes and European settlers alike. In addition to their military success, the Comanche were also highly skilled traders. They controlled vast herds of horses, which they traded with other tribes and settlers. The Comanche economy was based on the horse, and their wealth was measured in how many horses they owned. Horses were not only an essential tool for hunting and warfare, but also served as a form of currency. The Comanche maintained strong trade networks, which allowed them to exchange goods with neighboring tribes and settlers, further solidifying their position as the dominant force in the southern plains. Despite their military superiority, the Comanche, like other Native American tribes, faced increasing pressure from European settlers and the U.S. military. By the mid-19th century, the U.S. government sought to control the vast resources of the southern Great Plains, including the fertile lands and buffalo herds that were vital to the Comanche way of life. In response, the Comanche resisted fiercely, engaging in numerous skirmishes and battles with the U.S. Army. The Comanche's power began to wane after the Red River War of 1874 to 1875, a brutal campaign led by the U.S. military to subdue the Comanche and other Native American groups in Texas. After months of harsh fighting, the Comanche were ultimately forced to surrender. Quanah Parker, one of the last great Comanche leaders, negotiated the tribe's surrender and led them onto reservations, signaling the end of their nomadic, warrior-based society. However, Quanah Parker's leadership during this time also set the stage for the Comanche's eventual adaptation to reservation life. Further to the east, the Iroquois Confederacy, also known as the Haudenosaunee, or People of the Longhouse, represents one of the most advanced and enduring forms of governance in pre-colonial North America. The Iroquois were a confederation of 6 nations: the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora. These nations formed a political and military alliance that was unparalleled in North America. The Iroquois Confederacy's system of governance was revolutionary. It was based on a sophisticated model of democracy, which emphasized consensus, balance of power, and collective decision-making. The Iroquois had a Grand Council made up of 50 sachems chiefs, each representing one of the 6 nations. This council was responsible for making decisions on matters that affected the entire Confederacy, and the emphasis was always on achieving consensus. The Iroquois believed that peace could only be achieved when all parties agreed, and this system of governance allowed the Confederacy to maintain stability for centuries. The Iroquois Confederacy was also a matrilineal society, meaning that descent was traced through the mother's line, and women held significant power within the community. Clan mothers, who were selected by the women of each clan, had the authority to nominate and remove chiefs, ensuring that leadership was always accountable to the people. In the 17th century, the Iroquois Confederacy engaged in a series of wars known as the Beaver Wars or the Iroquois Wars to control the fur trade in the Great Lakes region. The Iroquois sought to monopolize the fur trade, particularly in beaver pelts, which were highly prized by European settlers for the making of hats and garments. The Iroquois, allied with Dutch and later English traders, sought to drive out other Native American groups, including the Huron and Algonquin, who had established trade networks with the French. The Beaver Wars were marked by strategic military campaigns in which the Iroquois used their superior knowledge of the land and their alliances with European traders to gain access to firearms, which gave them a significant military advantage. The wars resulted in the Iroquois controlling vast territories and dominating the fur trade, making them one of the most powerful Native American groups in North America. The Iroquois Confederacy's influence began to decline during the 18th century, particularly during the American Revolution. The Confederacy was deeply divided over whether to support the British or the American colonists. Some factions, such as the Mohawk, chose to side with the British, while others, like the Oneida, supported the American cause. This internal division weakened the Confederacy and left them vulnerable to the encroachment of European settlers. After the Revolution, the United States began to push westward, and the Iroquois were forced into a series of treaties that further diminished their territory and autonomy. Despite their resistance, the Iroquois were eventually pushed onto reservations, but their contributions to American governance, particularly the influence of their democratic system, would remain a part of U.S. history. The Iroquois Confederacy's system of decision-making and balance of power was cited by figures such as Benjamin Franklin as a model for the development of the U.S. Constitution. The stories of the Sioux, Comanche, Iroquois, and other tribes represent more than just resistance to European colonization. They are testimonies of survival, adaptability, and cultural preservation. Despite centuries of systemic violence, forced relocation, and the eradication of their languages and traditions, Native American tribes have continued to endure. Today, these tribes continue to maintain their cultural practices, language, and traditions. The political structures developed by the Iroquois, the military tactics of the Sioux and Comanche, and the agricultural practices of other tribes have left a lasting impact on American society. Native American communities, though reduced and often marginalized, continue to fight for recognition, sovereignty, and justice. Their resilience and strength remain a testament to the endurance of their people, their cultures, and their right to self-determination. These stories serve as powerful reminders of the strength and ingenuity of Native peoples who, even in the face of overwhelming adversity, have not only survived, but also thrived, shaping the history of the Americas in profound and lasting ways.